Hey up everybody, my name's Joshua Morrison, director of Johnny Moz's Lessons in Confidence. Today I want to do a bit of a top 10, right? I've never done a top 10 really, and I kind of like them. You know, whenever I go on YouTube or something I see a top 10, I'm kind of more likely to click them. That's why they make them, isn't it? It's basically clickbait. This video is basically clickbait. Well, it's not clickbait because you saw a title that said, this is my top 10 favourite albums or whatever the title is, and now you've clicked on the video and it's going to be the top 10 albums that I think are the best albums. Right, so as you can tell by the hair, I like my sort of rock sort of stuff, right? So this list kind of reflects that. I like a lot of other music, but a lot of albums I find in other genres don't quite come together in a holistic way. I like individual tracks from loads of albums, and some of my favourite tracks aren't going to be featured on any of the albums I'm going to list here, right? But the thing is with some of those albums is that might be like one diamond in the rough, right? This is just a load of solid silver, right? So we're just going to go through each album, and I'm going to list it off and I'm going to talk about it a little bit and how I got into it, why I like it, and recommend you maybe a track from it or whatever, right? So we're going to do from the bottom. So at number 10, it's not really any real order or anything like that, but number 10 is Nick Drake, 5 Leaves Left. So that's the little sort of album cover. It's a nice album cover, sort of looking out like that, bit green all around, you know. It's a nice, quaint little album cover. I don't find any issue with it. I think Pink Moon has a better album cover. The reason I haven't picked Pink Moon is because I'm not a massive fan of the solo acoustic guitar instrumentation. I do think that Pink Moon is an incredible album, almost to the point of being outsider art, because Nick Drake at that point was very, very excluded from the world. He had removed himself from the world pretty much entirely, and he was spending most of his time I think he lived at his parents' farm somewhere in like the countryside of England, and he just sat in his room and just like made music, and he didn't really talk to other people. Right, and 5 Leaves Left, I think is earlier on. Maybe he was a little bit more outgoing, enough to find musicians, incredible musicians for this album. Riverman, 3 Hours, all the songs on it are just fantastic. It's one of the few albums that I can just put on and just repeat and listen to on repeat. I've listened to it twice in a row, quite a few times. It's just so immersive and so, I don't know, nice. There's something about it that I find really soothing and really pleasant, even if the songs themselves can be a little bit of a downer, right? It's a great folky kind of album with nice arrangements on top that don't like just place it squarely in the folk sect genre, right? Because I'm not a massive folk guy, right? You're going to find out later that I like my heavy drums and my weird time signatures and all that kind of stuff. But this was a really nice, simple, not necessarily simple, somber, sweet, lovely album with some really interesting stuff done to the tunings of the guitars. That's Nick Drake's thing. He likes to tune his guitars in weird sort of tunings so that you can create really interesting melodies that would be hard to make if you just did it all in E standard, right? And I think what makes the album so good is, one is the songwriting. His songwriting is second to none, right? And 2, I think this was just the perfect place and the perfect time. And I think it's the perfect blend of his later 2 albums, Brighter, Lighter, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, and Pink Moon. Pink Moon is almost to the point of outsider art in terms of its themes and the way that it kind of puts across its message and its ideas, right? And Brighter, Lighter, or however you say it, is a little bit more chirpy and a little bit more poppy and high energy, which I do like both of these albums, but I feel like 5 Leaves Left just combines what he did later into a really interesting package, and I think it's one of the best albums of all time. Next up, we've got Fonts, High Expectations, Low Results. right? Which you might not know Faunts. If you ever played Mass Effect, they did the M4 Part 2, which plays in the credits. I think they also did Das Malefiz, which plays in Mass Effect 3 at some point in that. I think it's when you're running around for that dead child. They played Das Malefiz, which is a song that they did on an EP. Oh no, that was on their second album, that Feels Love Thinking Of, or something like that, right? But High Expectations, Low Results doesn't have any songs that later appeared in Mass Effect. I feel like Faunts, as they got into their career, went a bit too far into the slowcore, ambient kind of thing, which I have friends that really like that kind of sound, and that's some of their favourite stuff. For me, I like more of the rocky kind of stuff that they were doing earlier on in their career. For instance, Will You Tell Me Then off of this album is absolutely second to none fantastic. The solo around the 5-minute mark of that song, it sounds like it's not even coming from something that a human could play, but it's not a particularly complex solo. It's just the sound effects that they have on it. It almost sounds like a flanger, but combined with something else. It gives you this sort of sort of sound. I can't give it any sort of justice with my tongue, but it is a truly fantastic solo. Places I found is a very nice, slow ballad, very, very atmospheric, very simple as well, with just singular chords and relying a lot on delay and effects. And then you've got later 23, which has a live version, which doesn't have the vocals in it, but it has some incredible, incredible guitar work on it that isn't featured on the studio version. Yeah, I would say that this album is an incredibly atmospheric, immersive thing. You notice a pattern here. I like atmosphere and I like immersion. I like to feel like I'm being introduced to a world when it comes to an album. And I think this Faunts, High Expectations, Low Results, if you see the album cover, right, you can see that it feels spacey. It feels like you're entering a new dimension, and the music reflects that. It feels like just a very interesting set of sounds and arrangements that never feels like it's going too far into quirky indie, never feels like it's playing it safe, but also never feels like it's doing experimentation for the sake of experimentation. The 13-minute song at the end of the album, which I can't remember the name of, and it's really annoying me that I can't remember. Gone with the Day, that's it. Gone with the Day is an incredibly long song. It's about 13 minutes, and it's very simple. It's very slow. I don't know if it's just a 4-chord thing, but it feels like it could just be a 4-chord thing. And the whole point of it is it's this very slow build that never goes to a full crescendo. It stays at this plateau and allows you to live in this world. And it's a very easygoing song, despite it feeling very melancholic. It's a beautiful, beautiful song, a beautiful album. And I cannot recommend this album enough. It's an album that a very good friend of mine introduced me to about 8 years ago. And I've loved it ever since. It's been one of my favourite albums since then. Next up, we've got the American Analog set, For Forever. Now, I actually got into American Analog set right before they announced this album via the album Know by Heart, right? Fantastic album, Know by Heart. And that would have been the album that's on this list, if not for the fact that right after I got into this band, which had not been active since 2005, right? So for nearly 20 years, this band has been inactive. I get into them 1 month after I'm into them, they announce this album, For Forever, and then a month after that or so, it's released, right? And I wasn't expecting much, because usually comeback albums from these kind of bands are kind of shite, right? I wasn't expecting it to hold up. I didn't expect to. I was going to give it a chance and sort of go, oh yeah, it's not really as good. But then I put it on, and honestly, it really, really blew my mind, and just how fan-fucking-tastic this album is, and how they were able to take everything that they had done before and to build on it while staying true to their original sound, but also at the same time progressing in an interesting, not necessarily new direction, but just a direction that felt right for them, right? So on this album, there's a lot of stuff that I will admit, I do feel like this album didn't need to be 60 odd minutes. I feel like it would have been better at being about 45 minutes. Like, for instance, Over the Jeans, I feel like is a bit naff. There's Gin Shakes, which has this one bit where it's like, fuck you, give me gin shakes, or something like that, and I just think it sounds a bit naff. But it is a good song still, but I just thought that bit is like, gave you fucking gin shakes. It just annoys me, right? But at the same time, if I forget those songs and go back to the stuff that I do like, for instance, the 13-minute title track For Forever, which is this very similar to Gone with the Day from Faunt. It's a very slow track that starts off with like 3 or 4 minutes of just pure ambience, building up to this quite slow drum pattern. It feels a little bit Pink Floydian. I feel like what makes American Analog Set so great is their really tight drum sounds and the way that they play live, but they make it all feel like it's, I don't know, like every note is there for a purpose, for a reason, right? And for instance, Konica and Maliko it's become one of my favorite ever songs, right? Honestly, it is a beautiful, beautiful song. And it's got this dun 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 dun. That doesn't sound very interesting when I'm doing it, right? But it is a really, really fantastic sound. And all of the songs are incredibly simple in terms of what they are, and they repeat things for quite a long time. But their riffs and their ideas and their melodies are such earworms that they don't need more than what they give you, right? It's like how you might go to a fancy restaurant and they give you a small meal, but it fills you up. That's what American Analog Set does for me, and I think that they are really fantastic. I think them and Faunt are like two opposite sides of a coin, whereas Faunt is quite, what would I say, reverby with the way that they put their music out. American Analog Set is almost the opposite, where it's almost like they're scared of reverb. And when they do use reverb, they're using it very deliberately for a specific reason. They're not particularly interested in that kind of shoegazy type sound, but they still live within that same realm. And I would really recommend that you check out For Forever. Next up, we have Immortal Technique, Revolutionary Volume 2, right? So this is another side of me. I like political hip hop. I like rap that talks about, you know, like politics and, you know, society being a bit like shit and all that kind of stuff, and various injustices, and going into it and telling stories around it, right? For instance, You'll Never Know tells the story of Immortal Technique meeting a woman in high school, meeting a girl in high school, and kind of falling in love with her, and they go out for a bit, and then I'm not going to spoil the story because it's so good, right? But the way that he tells it, I remember listening to it and it full on brought me to tears. It really did. I think it's 8 minutes long and it deserves every fucking second of it, right? It's got stuff on there like The Fourth Branch, which talks about the influence that the media has over government. It has, Harlem Streets, which talks about, there's one line in it which is something about all of us being packed like sardines onto this public transport, going back and forth to and from work, living in a big shithole and trying to get something of yourself. And I don't feel completely equipped to talk about the themes that Immortal Technique is actually getting into, because, you know, he's obviously lived such a more extreme life than I have, that I feel like it would be unfair for me to even just talk about it in just this sort of glib way. So I would really recommend you just go and check out the album. Even although like it's got skits on it and stuff, and I don't really care about skits and things like that, and like there's audio clips and stuff, like at the end of Harlem Streets there's a phone call, and I just think you don't need any of this stuff. I would still recommend that you check the album out wholeheartedly. I really, really would. Next up we have Porcupine Tree, Fear the Blank Planet, which is Porcupine Tree's sort of big metal concept album. Now, I've never thought that Porcupine Tree do a particularly good job at metal. They're a progressive metal band that I feel like work a lot better when they're doing their Pink Floyd clean sounding stuff, and then when they get into metal, it almost feels like baby's first metal. The riffs feel very plain, very basic. The tone doesn't feel completely great. But on Fear the Blank Planet, they managed to make the metal really, really, really work, because the theme and the storyline of Fear the Blank Planet is all about the life of a teenager in the 2000s who's been essentially prescribed all of these legal antidepressants and various drugs and ADHD medication, things like that, that have ended up numbing his own sense of self and state, and the world around him kind of feels phony and fake, and his own life feels meaningless. And it really does a good job of portraying that. I mean, there's been bad points in my life when I've looked around and sort of thought, am I in Fear of a Blank Planet right now? Right? It's got the 17-minute long Anesthetize, which is one of the best songs of all time. It's got 2 really great short ballads. It's got Way Out of Here, which is a really, really nice story. It does a really good job setting the atmosphere, right? There's a line where I can envision it perfectly in my head, where this kid is like walking around with the iPod, and he's got his headphones on, and he's probably got his hands in his pockets with a hat on, right? Just sort of like this. And he's walking past a level crossing, and the train's coming, and he sort of thinks, I could just throw myself in front of that. And it just does such a great job of encapsulating that mentality and that idea. And sure, Steven Wilson, I don't think is necessarily the best lyricist ever. And I feel like a common criticism of this album is that it feels like it is a 40-year-old, out of touch, privileged bloke coming at this topic that he doesn't really know a lot about. But I get a lot from Fear of a Blank Planet, and I feel like I had a similar, I mean, I never got nearly as far as the kid in Fear of a Blank Planet did, but I relate to the story quite heavily, and I feel like he did a good job of portraying the themes that he discusses in the album, of over-medication of the youth, and how that can lead to more mental health crises within them. And I think it just does a fantastic job of that. Next up, we have Polygon Wonderland by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. This is, I think, their 4th album to come out in 2017. And apparently, when it came out, the reason that it was made for free is because the band wasn't particularly happy with the album. They thought that it was a bit rushed. They felt like it wasn't finished. They felt like the mix wasn't perfect. But if you listen to it, I think the mix is absolutely fucking tremendous. I think that they really hit lightning in a bottle here. Right? And this is a band that, despite releasing so much and having such a prolific discography, are able to hit quality after quality after quality. And they are, in fact, one of the reasons that I'm so adamant about this mentality of quantity over quality, because you are allowed to have quantity and quality. And I think King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard really show that with this album in particular. I mean, their 4th album in 2017, that I think they worked on it for about a year. I think some demos came out early 2017, and then the album came out in November 2017. It's released completely for free. You can download all the stems and do whatever you want with it. You can make your own vinyl out of it. You can do all sorts of stuff. I'm planning on potentially putting one of the tracks, I might put In a Cell on the film that I'm working on. So it might be on there, it might not be. I've downloaded the song and chucked it in there for the moment. I might see how I feel about it. I also need to actually like full-on check all the legalities, because even though the band has said time and time again that the album is free and you are allowed to do whatever you want with it, I do see that it gets copyright struck on YouTube, for instance, so if people use the music. So there might be some kind of legality that I'm not entirely sure of. But getting away from that, just getting into the album itself, this is King Gizzard's take on, I guess, progressive rock, but not the wanky Genesis Yes kind of prog rock. This is more your Pink Floyd-y kind of stuff. It's a very interesting sort of polyrhythmic kind of suite, right? So I don't think of it as being an album full of like 10, 11 songs, how many there are. It's more that there's 4 10-minute long suites. So there's Crumbling Castle, which is quite a heavy introduction to the whole thing, which feels like the falling of an empire. It's got this really, really earwormy main guitar, like dun 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 dun. And that is the song that actually got me into this band. And then, you know, because you kind of get into that song and you don't really bother with the rest of the album for a bit, and then, you know, you kind of go discover the rest of their music, and then you come back to this album and you find stuff like Polygon Wonderland, the title track, which has the line, we're gonna make it, Polygon Wonderland, which for some reason I kind of hum to myself if I'm like in a bit of a bad mood and I feel like, you know, I'm trying to get through the day, you know, and I've got loads of stuff to do and I'm stressed, I tend to hum that to myself, and it tends to work. The suites from there on become usually 3 songs that are all about 3 minutes. They combine to make this sort of 10-minute long thing. It's got stuff on there like Searching, which is this really atmospheric synthy realm that you kind of encapsulate in, which has lyrics about, you know, the mind being like a hard drive that you need to format, and this kind of thing. And I do really think that the album itself does a great job of combining synth, acoustic guitar, electric guitar. It feels clean, and whenever it goes heavy, it doesn't feel like it's going into full-on metal. It feels extremely balanced as an album in terms of its instrumentation and arrangement. And I feel like the pace of it is absolutely perfect. I don't really think that there's much wrong with the album. I'm not a massive fan of Horology, the song Horology, but I don't hate it or anything, and I'll still happily listen to it on a re-listen, and it never takes me out of the album in any way. I just think it's one of those songs that works better in the context of the album. Yeah, really recommend that you listen to Polygon Wonderland. Next up we have Camel by Camel, the debut by Camel, right? Which is a progressive rock band that started in the early 70s. They were quite late to the scene in terms of prog rock, which may be why they never took on as much as they really should have, with the likes of, compared to the likes of Yes and Genesis and Pink Floyd and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and things like this, which all got their start in the late 60s. Camel started a little bit later, and I feel like they were a bit late to the party, but I think that they have an incredibly good combination of the slow, more atmospheric and psychedelic influences of stuff like Pink Floyd, and the more virtuoso kind of widdly-wee stuff that Genesis and Yes were doing. They managed to really find a good balance between the two, where it never feels like you're listening to just pure instrumental wankery, but at the same time, it never feels like anything's getting stale. Everything always feels like it's keeping you on your toes, and every song on this feels really light and delicate and easygoing and really, really relaxing. I feel like this is my comfort album. I go to this album for comfort. You know, it's the frozen pizza of albums, in my opinion. And you know what? I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's an incredibly good thing. I feel like Camel, as they got further along into their discography, into the late 70s and early 80s, their sound became a lot more bright and sharp. Stuff like I Can See My House From Here and Moon Madness. I feel like it's a little bit bright with the way that the guitars and there's a bit more of a jazz influence within it, and I feel like it just didn't quite work as well compared to the soft, quite moody, quite what's the word, dry sound of debut, and also their second album, Mirage. I feel like after that, from the Snow Goose onwards, they start to go downhill a little bit until you get back to the 90s when they had a bit of a resurgence with stuff like A Nod and a Wink and Rajaz. Really, really recommend that you check them out. Next up we have Loki, Soundtrack to the Struggle 2. Really, I want to say Soundtrack to the Struggle 1 and 2, because look, there's some songs on both of these albums that I think are just kind of shite, but I feel like if you took both of these albums and combined them to make one holistic experience, you would make one of the best double albums of all time, right? So Soundtrack to the Struggle 1 was done in the early Obama era, and Soundtrack to the Struggle 2 is during Donald Trump's first presidency, and he does an amazing job of critiquing both presidents, and does an amazing job of getting into various like heavy political themes. For instance, the song Terrorist and Terrorist Part 2 are this really interesting two-parter, getting into the details of how, you know, we start to suspect people are being terrorists, and then Terrorist Part 2 takes it further and makes a big, portrays the scene of a court hearing where Loki is on trial because apparently the UK government banned him from the city of Westminster because they thought he was a terrorist, and so the song is kind of a response to that. So Terrorist Part 1 is about how not every Arab is a terrorist, and then Part 2 is about how specifically Loki isn't a terrorist. And then you have Abomination 1 and 2, which are also really fantastic. You have stuff like Letter to the 1%, which is this really, really amazing call to action, really, of just, you know, thanking all the people that are thankless, you know, the people who clean the bathrooms and the people who, you know, cater to all the parties of all the rich people, the people that get forgotten to the sands of time. It's really fantastic. And Loki consistently does a fantastic job with his lyricism. And even if sometimes I think a song isn't good, usually it's not because of the lyrics themselves, it's because of, I just don't like the beat. For instance, he's done a few Free Palestine songs, and I agree with what he's saying, but I just don't like the beat on his Free Palestine songs. He uses the same beat on like four songs. I think they're more like event songs. He makes them specifically for various protests that he attends and stuff like that. So I understand why he's using the same beat multiple times, but I just don't like the beat that he's using. Then Soundtrack to the Struggle 2, which is the album I really wanted to talk about, has stuff like Ahmed, which is this really, really gorgeous song about this lad called Ahmed, who is a Syrian immigrant who dies, and it basically goes into how this boy was killed by politics that he has no idea about. He was killed by something he has no power over, that he doesn't understand, right? And at the end of the day, everyone else out there is just going to vilify him as one of the out group who are trying to get in, right? They're part of the problem, and it's just a kid, you know, who's just gotten executed essentially, or has drowned himself when his family are just trying to better his life, you know? It's really, really harsh stuff that's really difficult to grapple with. And then there's Ghosts of Grenfell, which has a live version that I would really, really recommend, where it's got this amazing, amazing and gorgeous guitar solo where over it he's kind of saying, where is this person who died in Grenfell? Where is this person who died in Grenfell? Where is this person who dies in Grenfell? And the guitar solo gets more and more emotional and more high stakes as it goes on. And that, I think, is absolutely, absolutely fantastic, okay? Then, yeah, that's basically everything I have to say on Loki. Then Pink Floyd, Animals, 1977. I thought about putting Meddle on there, but honestly, I listened to Meddle a couple of days ago, and it's not that it hasn't held up, it's still amazing, but I think I'm a little bit bored of it because it's been my favourite album for so long, right? So I wanted to try just a different album, and I thought Animals. Animals is really, because it covers the long form style of Pink Floyd that I really like. You know, it's technically 4 songs. Technically it's 5 songs, but really there's 3 songs you need to know about. Dogs, pigs, and sheep. And they are all fantastic, right? I'm not going to really say much more. I think you should just go and listen to it, because look, you already know about fucking Animals. If you're however long into this video, right, you're 25 minutes into some random guy's video, right, talking about various progressive rock, right? You know about Animals. Just go listen to it again if you want to, or if you're bored of it, go listen to Atom Heart Mother. Pink Floyd's a good band, all right? Listen to them. And then number 1, don't laugh, Dream Theater, Train of Thought, right? I've thought about doing Octavarium, but Octavarium has Never Enough, which I don't think is a particularly great song. And I don't know, I just thought Train of Thought is just banger after banger after banger after banger. It's got no duds within it whatsoever, right? And it's an album that I grew to love over time. Started off with me finding the live version of In the Name of God, which got me into the entire band. It's a fantastic closer to the album. And if you don't like Dream Theater at the moment, if you think that they're a bit shit and a bit cheesy and a bit whatever, try listening to In the Name of God, right? Maybe the live version, live at Budokan. Try listening to that. If you can get through the weird instrumental section about 9 minutes in, you'll probably like Dream Theater. If you don't like that, you probably won't like Dream Theater. It's a litmus test, essentially, right? And then after that, I got into Endless Sacrifice. Then I got into As I Am, and then This Dying Soul, which then led me down Mike Portnoy's whole 12-step suite, which really I related to because I quit drinking, and so I kind of enjoyed listening to basically a suite of songs, all talking about the process of quitting drinking. And then the final song that I got into on this album, that originally I thought was the dud on the album, but then I decided that it's actually one of my favourites, is Honour Thy Father, which is just an absolutely beautiful fucking song. I'm not going to go more in depth with it really, because this video is already half an hour long. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know. Let me know what you thought. Did you want to see more top 10 stuff? If you do, let me know. If you don't, also let me know. And yeah, I'm gonna take care. I'm gonna leave you, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let me know your top 10 albums and how do they differ from mine. And are there any albums of mine where you think maybe the band that I mentioned did a better album, and why do you think that album is better? Let me know. Let me know your thoughts in general. And take care, everybody, and bye-bye.